Part 1. The morning began with a hush that did not feel like peace. Reporters hovered near the doors, clerks shuffled files like they were folding secrets, and two uniformed cops claimed the front row as if the courtroom were theirs. Travis spoke first, his voice sharp, his smirk sharper. He joked about owning this place. His younger partner, Luke, copied the grin. People looked away. That was how fear had learned to live here. The black woman who entered carried no robe and no entourage, only a slim leather folder and a calm that made the air listen. She walked with quiet purpose, her silver streak of hair catching the light from the tall windows. Some thought she was a clerk, others thought she was a witness. Travis thought she was nobody. He clicked his tongue, waved two fingers without looking at her, and demanded a file like he was ordering coffee. She did not answer, not because she was weak, but because she was measuring the room. She read the names on the docket, the cases stacked for the day, and the crowd itself, who sat near whom, who whispered, who watched. Her eyes were steady, her breath even. She set her folder on the table and turned a page as if time belonged to her. The hush deepened, even the clock seemed to wait. Travis took her silence as insult. He stepped closer, boots loud on the wood, pride louder than law. "Where is the Jameson file?" he asked. The clerk half rose, unsure. Luke stared at the floor. He knew the look in Travis's eyes, that stormy look that always came before the damage. The woman lifted her chin, met Travis's stare, and said in simple, level words, "You will not shout in this courtroom." The sentence landed like a bell, soft but final. Travis flushed. He laughed too hard, like a man who needs an audience to feel tall. He leaned in until his badge filled her vision. He called her names that made a reporter lower her pen in disgust. Still the woman did not move. She said, "This room has rules. Respect is one of them. Sit down and wait. Your turn will come." Every face turned to Travis. The clerk swallowed. The bailiff froze. Luke whispered, "Let it go, Travis. Not today. But pride is a chain that drags a man." Travis lifted his hand, quick and careless. The sound of the slap cracked the air. It was not just a strike. It was a door slamming on the old belief that some people can be treated as less. The crowd went silent, the silence after thunder. The woman steadied herself, the sting bright on her cheek. She did not flinch away. She looked directly at him, and with that same steady breath said, "You have just assaulted a court officer." Luke stepped back like the floor had tilted. The clerk whispered an oath. A reporter's eyes flashed with the heat of a headline. Travis sneered and said, "Prove it, you don't belong here." The woman reached into her leather folder with unwavering hands. She placed a single key card on the table, then a plain black phone, then a small brass pin in the shape of balanced scales. Her voice stayed calm, too calm for Travis's comfort. "This room belongs to the law, not to your temper." The side door opened with a soft click. A senior bailiff entered. He recognized the pin, then the woman, and his face changed, not with shock but with relief. "Ma'am," he said, "your chambers are ready." We delayed because the new robe was still being pressed. The word chambers moved through the benches like a current. A reporter stood so fast her chair scraped. The clerk pressed a hand to his mouth. Luke blinked hard, as if trying to reset the world he thought he knew. Travis's smirk fell. He reached for certainty and found none. The woman closed her folder, lifted the brass pin, and fixed it to her lapel. Her cheeks still warm, her posture unbroken, she stepped toward the bench, and with each step the room rearranged itself around a truth it had refused to see. She said in that same measured tone, "Court is now in session. Be seated." The clerk sat like he had been. Given back his spine, the reporters leaned in. The bailiff nodded once to the deputies at the wall. Luke's lips parted as he whispered, "Judge." The title hung in the air, not as a shock twist, but as a mirror, the kind that makes everyone look at themselves. Travis's face went pale. His mouth opened and closed. A fish pulled from water and left to air. He tried to speak but found no words that could hold him up. The judge looked at him, not with anger, but with a gravity that felt heavier. "Officer Travis," she said, "you will remain where you are. You will not speak unless addressed. There will be a record of your conduct today, and there will be consequences measured by the law you swore to serve." The clock hands crossed into the minute that changes everything. The judge's gavel had not yet fallen, but justice had already started moving, not loud, not dramatic, but certain. Like a tide, the audience could feel it, the old order, the easy cruelty, the private network that protected arrogance. All of it trembled because one calm voice refused to bend. The judge turned to the clerk. "Call the first matter," she said, and her eyes never left Travis, the promise of truth bright and unblinking. Part 2. The air in the courtroom grew thick. Reporters shuffled closer to the front benches, pens trembling above their pads. The sound of the slap still echoed in their ears, but now it was joined by something heavier, the weight of realization. Luke stood beside Travis, his face pale, his hands twitching as though he wanted to pull his partner back, but the chains of loyalty held him in place. Travis stared ahead, his arrogance cracking like paint on old walls. The judge sat tall, her gavel resting on the bench like a silent warning. The clerk read the first case, his voice shaky at first, then steadier as the judge nodded encouragement. The woman who had walked in like a stranger. As now the force holding the entire room together, Travis shifted, trying to regain control. He muttered to Luke, "She's bluffing." But deep down he knew there was no bluff here. The brass pin, the bailiff's respect, the tone of command, all of it spelled truth. Still his pride screamed louder than reason. He sneered, "She won't dare move against me, not in public, not with my connections." The judge looked at him again, her eyes calm but sharp. "Officer Travis," she said evenly, "remain silent until your case is addressed." He laughed, a short, empty sound, but it fooled no one. His voice bounced off the walls and died quickly, leaving behind only the uncomfortable truth that his power was shrinking. Luke leaned closer, whispering, "Stop, she's got us cornered. Don't push it." But Travis had lived too long believing the world bent for him. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as if daring the judge to strike back. Witnesses from the first case stepped forward, a property dispute small compared to the drama unfolding. Yet every word they spoke was charged with new tension. The judge listened patiently, guiding them, making notes. Her calm authority washed over the room, but eyes kept darting to Travis, to the bruise of arrogance on his face, waiting for the moment when the tide would break. Travis tapped his fingers on the table, his impatience louder than respect. Finally, unable to keep silent, he snapped, "This whole circus is beneath me." The courtroom froze, every head turned. The judge leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "Officer Travis, you are out of order. If you speak again without leave, you will be removed." Travis smirked. "You think you can remove me? I own this city. I own this court. I slap who I want." The words burst from him like sparks from a fire that cannot control itself. Luke buried his face in his hands. Reporters gasped. One even whispered, he just admitted it. Did he know his mic was still on? The judge raised her hand. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. "Order," she declared, her voice louder now. Not a shout, but a force that cut through the air. Bailiffs, secure the officers. The two deputies who had been waiting along the wall stepped forward, hesitation in their eyes, but duty stronger. Travis stood quickly, knocking his chair back. He barked, "You wouldn't dare. Do you know who my brother is?" The judge remained calm, her eyes never leaving him. "I know exactly who you are, and that is why this ends here." The room erupted in whispers. The name of Travis's brother carried weight in the city. A councilman, powerful, feared, shielded by money and politics, but the judge's steady tone made it clear she was unmoved. Luke tried to step between them, his voice breaking. "Judge, please let me explain." But the deputies held firm, their hands near their cuffs. Travis pointed at the judge, his voice cracking for the first time. "You'll regret this. I'll tear this place apart," she answered softly. "No, officer, you already have, and it ends now." The gavel struck again, the sound like iron on stone. The judge called a brief recess, her voice calm as ever. "Court will resume in 10 minutes. During that time, Officer Travis will remain in custody of the bailiffs." Her words landed with finality. No room for debate, no space for arrogance. As she rose, the courtroom rose with her, not out of habit but out of respect that had been earned in a single, unforgettable moment. She walked past Travis, her cheeks still marked, but her dignity brighter than any scar, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Justice does not bow to fear." Travis trembled, the smirk gone, the empire he had built on intimidation now shaking beneath him. Luke stared at the floor, the realization dawning that the wrongs they thought hidden were now in the open. The judge left through the side door, her steps steady, her presence unshaken. The silence she left behind was not empty. It was the silence of change, a silence that promised the storm was only beginning. In the hallway, reporters scrambled to call their editors, the headline already forming in their minds, "Judge slapped by cop. Cop placed under arrest in her courtroom," and everyone knew this was just the beginning. The courthouse corridors buzzed like a hive struck by stone. Reporters raced with phones pressed to ears. Clerks whispered in tight circles, and even the marble walls seemed to carry the echoes of what had happened inside. Travis sat in a holding chair near the side door, wrists clenched, jaw tight, still trying to convince himself he had control. Luke paced a few feet away, his face pale, his breath shallow. He knew the headlines would not just be about Travis. His own name would be tied to the scandal. Guilt gnawed at him, regret whispering louder with every step. Inside chambers, the judge stood before a mirror, her fingers brushing the mark still bright on her cheek, but her eyes were steady. She had lived through worse. She had carried insults, stares, and whispered doubts all her life. This was not the first time someone underestimated her, but it was the first time the whole city would witness the cost of arrogance so plainly. She pressed her palm flat against the desk, whispering to herself, "Let justice speak louder than pain." Outside, the bailiff knocked gently. "Ma'am, the press is demanding statements. Shall I clear them?" she answered calmly. "Not yet. Let the truth grow legs before I give it a voice." 10 minutes later, the gavel fell again. Courtroom 4 filled to bursting. Spectators who had never cared for property disputes now squeezed into benches. The smell of ink, sweat, and fear mixed thick in the air. Travis was escorted back inside, his hands free but his pride bound. Luke followed, eyes darting, searching for a path out of this storm. The judge took her seat. The hush was immediate. She began with clarity. "Today's session will continue, but before we hear the next case, this court must address conduct that has threatened its dignity." Her gaze locked on Travis, and the whole room leaned forward as though a blade were about to drop. Travis forced a laugh, weak and brittle. "This is madness. I won't sit here and be judged by you." The irony burned even him as he said it. A reporter's pen scratched furiously, capturing every syllable. The judge replied, "Officer Travis, this court does not belong to me. It belongs to the people. And today the people will see that no badge, no brother, no shadowed alliance stands taller than the law." Murmurs spread, some shocked, some relieved, many nodding with hope. Travis shifted in his chair, his smirk trying to return, but the cracks showed too clearly. The clerk handed the judge a sealed envelope, delivered moments before by a trembling junior officer. She opened it slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she lifted her eyes to the courtroom. "What is hidden in darkness has a way of finding light," she said. "This file contains complaints buried for years, reports signed and then buried again, all pointing to patterns of intimidation, falsified arrests, and abuse tied to officers present in this room." Luke swallowed hard, his shoulders caving. He whispered, "She knows. She knows everything." Travis glared at him. "Shut up. Don't you say a word." But it was too late. The fear was visible. Reporters nearly climbed over benches to catch every word. The judge laid the envelope on the bench, her hand firm. "This is not a trial for officers Travis and Luke, not yet, but this court will no longer ignore the signs and the people of this city will no longer be silent." Travis shot to his feet, his voice breaking. "This is all lies planted by enemies, by rivals. You think you can destroy me in 4 minutes? I've built an empire." But the room was not with him. The murmurs grew into open disapproval, heads shaking, pens flying, cameras flashing. Luke covered his face with his palms. "Whisper, I. Nang, again and again, it's over, it's over." The judge lifted the gavel, her voice ringing. "Sit down, Officer Travis. You will answer in due course." The gavel struck. The sound reverberated through wood and bone. Travis fell back into his chair, no longer out of arrogance but because his knees could not hold him. The empire he spoke of cracked not with explosions, but with whispers and stares, with the silent verdict of a crowd that no longer feared him. The judge turned to the gallery. "The law does not move in secret anymore. This day marks its turning. Respect will be restored. Dignity will not be mocked, and power will answer for every bruise it has left behind." Luke raised his head, tears trembling in his eyes. He wanted to speak, to confess, but fear glued his tongue. Travis leaned toward him, hissed threats under his breath, but the words no longer carried weight. The deputies stood closer now, their hands steady, ready. The reporters whispered the headline already burning on their pages. Cops slap wrong black female judge. Empire exposed in 4 minutes. The judge looked once more at Travis, then at Luke, her tone softer now, almost sorrowful. When you believe yourself untouchable, you have already begun to fall. The storm outside the courthouse had grown. Television vans lined the street, cameras perched like watchful eyes, and crowds pressed against the barricades, some curious, some angry, some hopeful. The city had seen corruption before, but never had it cracked open this way. In the middle of a courtroom with one slap and one calm voice, inside the judge returned to her bench, her face composed, her posture steady. She held the room without raising her voice. The crowd of journalists leaned in, sensing the weight of history being written line by line. Travis sat rigid, his jaw tight, his hands clenched on the table. His mind raced through every favor. Evu. Rye backroom deal, every brother who could shield him, but none of that could stop the whispers around him. Luke leaned forward, whispering, "Travis, we can't fight this. She has the files, the witnesses, everything." Travis sneered back, "I'll bury her. I'll bury all of them." His words trembled, not with confidence but with desperation. Luke stared at him, realization dawning that the man he had followed was nothing but a mask cracking under pressure. The judge tapped the folder before her, each tap deliberate, measured, every tap a nail in the coffin of an empire built on arrogance. She spoke slowly. "These documents were hidden for years, but no longer. The people will see what has been concealed." Her eyes swept across the gallery, then landed on Travis. "Officer, today you struck me thinking I was powerless, but it is your own record that strikes louder." She lifted a sheet of paper. The room leaned forward. Every line on that page seemed to burn through Travis's skin. Accusations of brutality, illegal searches, silenced complaints, names of victims long ignored. Reporters scribbled, cameras clicked. The courtroom became a stage where truth played louder than lies. Travis lunged forward, his voice sharp. "This is a witch hunt. None of this will stick. My brother will." But he stopped. The judge's hand raised, her gaze firm. "No brother, no shield, no silence will save you now." The words landed like stones, heavy and undeniable. Luke dropped his head into his hands. The last defense is crumbling, he whispered. "She's right. It's over. Every hidden thing is in the open now." The deputy shifted closer. The crowd of spectators exhaled as if sharing one breath. The judge's voice softened, but it carried farther than any shout. "Respect. That is the core of justice. Without it, law is only chains. Today this court chooses respect, not fear." She glanced at Travis, then at the gallery, her cheek still bruised but her spirit untouchable. The moment struck everyone in the room, from the reporters writing history to the clerks who had long bowed under silence. Even the deputies straightened taller. The air seemed to clear, no longer clogged with arrogance, but filled with something sharper, cleaner, hope. Travis slumped, sweat on his brow, his smirk gone, his empire no longer roaring but whimpering. He tried once more, muttering, "I still have power. You'll regret this." But even he knew the words rang hollow. Luke finally lifted his head, his voice breaking. "Judge, may I speak?" The room stilled. Travis snapped, "Shut up, don't betray me." But Luke's shoulders squared for the first time, his eyes wet but clear. "I was wrong," he said. "Wrong to follow, wrong to stay silent, wrong to believe arrogance was strength." The confession cracked open the last shell of Travis's command. The crowd gasped. Reporters scribbled faster. Justice was no longer creeping, it was running. The judge listened, her expression steady, then nodded. "Truth spoken is the first step to repair, Officer Luke. Your words will be recorded, your actions weighed. But know this, silence is no longer your master." Luke bowed his head, tears dropping onto the table. Travis glared at him with venom, but venom had no sting left. The deputies stepped closer, ready. The gavel struck once, firm and final. "This session is adjourned until tomorrow, but let it be known, the law has opened its eyes." She stood, the crowd rose with her, and for the first time in years, the walls of the courthouse seemed to breathe free air. As the judge walked out, her steps steady, the whispers followed her, words like courage, justice, respect. Outside, the crowd erupted, not with violence but with chants, her name rising above the noise of the city. Cameras flashed, headlines flew, and somewhere in the chaos Travis felt his empire collapse, not with fire, but with truth too bright to hide. The night fell heavy on the city, yet the courthouse lights blazed like beacons. Report. Ears lingered on the steps, their voices filling the airwaves with updates every passing hour. Inside, the walls carried a strange hush, the kind that comes before a storm breaks for good. Travis sat alone in a dim holding room, his uniform wrinkled, his pride tattered. He replayed the moment of the slap in his head, but now it felt like his own downfall echoing back at him, not her weakness, his mistake. Luke sat nearby, hunched forward, hands clasped, guilt weighing him like iron chains. He whispered again and again, "I should have stopped him. I should have spoken sooner." In her chambers, the judge reviewed files under a single lamp, the shadows deep across her desk. Each page carried names, stories, complaints that had been buried under silence. She read them not as paper, but as voices long ignored. She paused, breathing deep, her cheeks still sore, her spirit sharper. She knew tomorrow would not just be about Travis or Luke. It would be about the city itself, about whether people would believe justice could still roar. She closed the folder and whispered, "Tomorrow the tide will not whisper. It will flood." The next morning, the courthouse was packed, the crowd larger than ever, television vans spilling into side streets, chants echoing against the stone walls. "Respect everyone, justice now." The air trembled with anticipation. Inside courtroom 4, every seat was filled, standing room taken, the reporters' cameras ready. The judge entered, her black robe now on her shoulders, the brass pin gleaming at her collar. The crowd rose in silence, the gavel struck once, and the room bowed to a calm that carried weight, stronger than anger, heavier than fear. Travis was brought in, flanked by deputies, his smirk gone, his eyes darting. The empire he once claimed seemed distant now. Luke followed, shoulders bowed, his steps hesitant. But when the judge looked at him, he lifted his head, her gaze steady. He drew strength from it. The judge began, "This court is not blind. It has seen what was hidden. It has heard what was silenced. Today, I is not about vengeance. It is about truth." Her words carried like a current, moving through the gallery, drawing every ear, every heart closer. The clerk read aloud sections of the hidden reports. Victims of false arrests, families torn by fabricated charges, business owners forced to pay bribes to keep their doors open. Each line was a hammer on the wall of Travis's empire. Cracks spreading wider, Travis shouted once, "Lies, all lies," but his voice cracked. The crowd hissed. Even Luke shook his head, whispering, "No, it's true." The judge lifted her hand. "Order," she commanded, and the gavel struck, the sound louder than Travis's denial. The silence after was sharp. Everyone knew denial could not hold against evidence so plain. A witness stepped forward, an elderly man with trembling hands, his voice soft but steady. He told of the night Travis and his men raided his store, took his savings, and left him beaten. Travis laughed, calling him senile, but the judge's eyes silenced the mockery. Another witness followed, a young mother. She spoke of her brother framed and jailed, her tears soaking the stand. The courtroom felt the weight of every story, and with each word, Travis shrank smaller, his seat no longer a throne, but a cage. Reporters scribbled furiously, headlines already forming, "Empire of Abuse Exposed, Judge Leads Reckoning." The judge listened, her face calm, her eyes burning with quiet fire. After each testimony, she spoke gently. "Your voice is heard, your dignity is restored," and the gallery wept, not from sadness but from the sudden realization that silence was breaking. Luke finally stood, trembling but clear. "I confess," he said, "my silence made me guilty. I followed orders because I was afraid, but fear is no excuse." The judge nodded. "Truth spoken is a seed, Officer Luke. Whether it grows will depend on what you do next." The words wrapped around him. Heavy yet freeing, Travis snarled, turning on Luke, "Traitor, coward." But no one listened. The crowd murmured against Travis now, not with fear but with disgust. The judge raised her gavel. "Travis Boone, you stand accused not by me alone, but by the people you swore to serve. Your empire ends not in silence but in light." Her words struck harder than the gavel. The deputies placed their hands on Travis's shoulders. He thrashed, shouting names, threats, promises, but the noise fell flat. The crowd no longer cared for his power. It was ashes in the wind. The session ended. The judge stood. The crowd rose. The chant began again. "Justice now. Respect for all." The sound thundered against the stone walls. Reporters rushed to their vans, broadcasting history in real time. Travis was led away, his voice drowned. Luke stood trembling but freer than he had ever been. The judge walked past them, her steps steady, her presence unshaken. The gavel had fallen, but the story was not done. Tomorrow would bring the final reckoning, the moment when empire turned fully to dust. Dawn broke over the courthouse with a sky painted in gray and gold. The streets below were already alive, hundreds gathered chanting, holding signs, some homemade, some simply bearing one word: respect. The city had not felt this united in years. The tension of fear was gone, replaced with the pulse of hope. Inside, the judge prepared in her chambers, her robe folded neatly, her brass pin polished bright. She paused at the mirror. Her cheek still carried the faint mark of the slap, but now it seemed less like a wound and more like a badge of endurance. She whispered to herself, "Today we finish what arrogance began in the holding cell." Travis sat with eyes bloodshot, his swagger gone. He muttered curses under his breath, replaying conversations with his brother, remembering the promises of power that now tasted like dust. Luke sat in another corner, silent, steady, waiting for what was to come. For once he was not hiding behind Travis, not shrinking. His confession the day before had lifted a weight he hadn't realized he carried. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Let it end. Let truth stand." The courtroom filled long before the gavel struck. Every seat taken. Reporters stacked shoulder to shoulder, cameras humming, the air buzzing like a storm before lightning. When the judge entered, the entire room rose, not just out of duty, but out of respect. The gavel struck once, sharp, final. "Today," she declared, "this court addresses the fate of those who thought themselves untouchable. Today, arrogance answers to justice." Her voice rolled through the room like thunder. Every head bowed slightly, as if acknowledging a force larger than themselves. The clerk read out the charges: misconduct, assault, corruption, intimidation. Each word another stone on the crumbling walls of Travis's empire. Witnesses were called once more, their stories brief but piercing. A store owner who lost his livelihood, a teenager falsely jailed, a woman threatened into silence. Each testimony stacked higher until the weight became unbearable. Travis tried to interrupt, shouting, "Lies, all of it," but the judge's gavel struck. "Officer Travis Boone, you will be silent. Your empire of fear has collapsed. Your voice no longer commands this court." Her words sliced through him, and the gallery erupted in applause before quieting again. Luke stood when called, his voice trembling but clear. "I was part of it. I stayed quiet. I followed orders, but I confess today so others will never fear again." His eyes met the judge's, then the crowd's, and for the first time in years, he felt clean. The judge nodded once. "Your confession will be weighed, but know this: truth has freed you more than silence ever did." The gallery murmured approval. Travis glared, but his venom had no bite. His empire was ashes, his shadow erased by the light of testimony. The judge leaned forward, her voice steady. "Travis Boone, you raised your hand, not only against me, but against the dignity of this court and the people it serves. You believe power could shield you, but power without respect is nothing but sand, and sand cannot stand against the tide. Today, your empire falls." The gavel struck, the sound louder than any shout. Deputies moved forward, securing Travis at last. His wrists bound, his voice breaking as he screamed names, threats, promises of revenge. But the crowd no longer listened. Their chant rose higher. "Justice now, respect for all," drowning him out. Reporters rushed to their vans, headlines spilling across screens. "Instant karma destroys empire." Judge stands unshaken. The city outside erupted. People cheering, clapping, some crying. The courthouse steps became a place of unity. The mark of shame turned into a symbol of strength. Luke was led away quietly, not in chains, but in queue. Steady, his shoulders lighter, his confession carrying him into whatever would come next. Travis, by contrast, was dragged shouting, his arrogance crushed. His empire gone in the span of 4 minutes that had ignited a revolution. The judge left the bench slowly, the gavel resting on the wood, her robe flowing behind her as she walked through the side door. The gallery rose again, their applause following her like a tide. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She carried herself with the same calm she had shown from the start, because justice was not about spectacle, it was about truth. And truth had spoken. Outside, the chants grew louder. Respect, justice, echoing into the sky, and so the story closed. Arrogance fell, dignity rose, and a single calm voice proved that instant karma does not whisper, it roars.